What do women really want to hear from men? What is the number one communication secret used by high-value men when talking to women? These are questions that many of us ponder, but few truly understand the answers. Today, I'm here to unravel these mysteries and show you how to elevate your communication, to attract and engage with women not just effectively, but irresistibly. Firstly, high-value men know the profound power of authenticity. They understand that being genuine isn't just about being honest, but about being real and present in the moment. It's about showing up as the best version of oneself, not just a facade built to impress. But let's dig deeper. The real secret lies in emotional intelligence, being attuned to a woman's feelings and responding with empathy and interest. High-value men listen more than they speak. They ask questions that show they're not just hearing, but truly listening and caring about what's being said. Now consider the story of Michael. In the heart of a bustling city, where the lights never dimmed and the streets never emptied, lived Michael, a man with a penchant for the extravagant. He was known for his tailored suits, his sleek sports car, and the lavish parties he threw in his penthouse. Yet beneath the shimmering surface of his seemingly enviable lifestyle, Michael felt an unmistakable void. He longed for a connection that money couldn't buy and grandeur couldn't fabricate. Michael's approach to dating was like his lifestyle, flashy and superficial. He would impress dates with expensive dinners and surprise them with extravagant gifts. However, the relationships were fleeting, the conversation shallow. He could sense the excitement in their eyes fade as quickly as it came, leaving him more alone than before. It was during this time of reflection that Michael crossed paths with an old friend, a renowned relationship coach known for her wisdom in matters of the heart. Seeing the disillusionment in his eyes, she introduced him to a novel idea: authentic communication. Forget the grand gestures, she advised. Focus on genuine connections. Share your true self, not your wealth. Skeptical but desperate, Michael decided to give it a try. On his next date, he chose a quiet, cozy cafe over a five-star restaurant. Dressed more casually, he felt oddly liberated from the expectations that his usual flamboyance carried. Sitting across is Anna, a woman he had met through a mutual friend. Michael found himself talking about his passion for photography, a hobby he had neglected. He spoke of the serene mornings he spent capturing the sunrise, the way the light played with the horizon. Moments he cherished yet rarely shared for fear they were too mundane. To his surprise, Anna leaned in, her eyes alight with curiosity. "I love photography too," she confessed, and soon they were exchanging stories of missed shots and perfect moments, laughing over shared frustrations and aspirations. As weeks turned into months, Michael and Anna grew closer. Their dates filled with meaningful conversations and shared silences that spoke volumes. Michael found himself more fulfilled than he had ever been, not because of the validation his wealth brought him, but because of the genuine connection he had forged. One evening, as they walked hand in hand along the riverbank, the city lights reflecting in the water like scattered gems, Michael stopped and looked into Anna's eyes. "I never knew talking could feel like this," he confessed. "To really connect with someone, it's like igniting a spark that turns into a flame." Anna smiled, squeezing his hand. "And to think," she whispered, "it all started with a simple conversation." Michael realized then that the true essence of communication was not about impressing, but about impacting, not merely entertaining, but engaging. In Anna's eyes, he saw not just the reflection of the city lights, but the glow of a deeper connection, one that no amount of wealth could have ever purchased. And in that moment, Michael knew he had found something far more valuable than all the treasures he had ever owned. He had discovered the power of authentic connection. Imagine how powerful it feels to not just talk to a woman, but to connect with her. To not just share a conversation, but to ignite a spark that could turn into a burning flame. This is not about manipulation. It's about transformation. It's about being a man who speaks not to impress, but to impact. Not to merely entertain, but to engage. So I challenge you today to take this knowledge and apply it. Become a man who listens, who empathizes, who connects. Be a man who is not afraid to show his true self, because high-value men know that authenticity breeds connection, and connection is the key to unlocking the heart. As we conclude, remember, the art of conversation is a skill, and like all skills, it improves with practice. Start today and transform how you communicate with women. Be genuine, be thoughtful, and watch as the world opens up to you in ways you never imagined. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up by hitting the like button below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more content like this, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Your support means the world to me, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Thanks for being a part of our Modern Stoic Minds community.